Hello to everyone in the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral community. This is Father Jonathan. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to extend a greeting to all those who I work closely with in ministry, especially our young adults, our college students, our young couples. But anyone who watches these videos, I hope they're edifying. Please remember to like and subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, comment on these videos and other postings we have. Stay connected, ask questions, be engaged, grow spiritually through engagement. Now, I want to continue right away with our conversations that we've been having over the past few months about the Sunday scripture reading. Now, this coming Sunday is the last Sunday before the first part of the fast begins, and it's dedicated or named after the gospel reading, which we'll read from Matthew 25. It's the gospel reading called the Parable of the Final Judgment, or the Last Judgment. And as we begin our Lenten journey, our fast, our great fast, it's important to frame everything that we're doing in light of this passage. There's a reason that it precedes the first portion of the fast, where we refrain from eating meat in anticipation of refraining from dairy and oil and wine and fish and other things, starting on Kathara Deftera, on Clean Monday. And so in the parable, we hear Christ offer an account of the final judgment using the image of sheep and goats. Now, the sheep who are on Christ's right are those who listen to his word and follow him, whereas those who are on his left, the goats, not so much. But how does he explain in the parable the way in which that they're actually heeding his call? It's interesting, as we approach our Lenten journey and a fasting period, a period of increased fasting and prayer and discipline and reading of the scriptures, hopefully attending more services, that nowhere in the passage do we hear that we are judged on whether or not we did these things. We are judged, however, on whether or not we loved, when we loved our neighbor and God, because God identifies with the neighbor. Now, how does this happen? Well, first he says, "Come, O blessed of my Father," when he's speaking to the sheep. And he says, "For when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick and in prison, you visited me." We are living in accordance with the call to love when we offer that love in tangible ways to those in need. And Christ, because he was hungry, he was thirsty, he was naked on the cross, he was sick with the wounds of the cross, and he was imprisoned. All of those things means that he identifies with us in our sufferings in those ways and many others. He became like us in every way except sin. Now, the sheep respond, "When did we see you, Lord?" When did we see you, Lord? Recognizing him as Lord and do these things. And he said, "Whenever you did this to the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me." Again, he identifies with them. Now, the sheep were doing it not because they had to, not because they were trying to enter into God's good graces, because they didn't even realize they were doing it. And I'll come back to that in a moment. For the goats didn't do that. When he speaks to the goats, he says, "When I was hungry and thirsty, you didn't give me food or drink. When I was naked, you didn't clothe me. When I was sick or in prison, you did not visit me." And they said, "Lord, when did we see you?" Again, Lord, recognizing him as Lord. "When did we see you and not do these things?" And he says, "Whenever you did not do this to the least of these, my brethren, you did not do it to me." And so it stands as an accusation, but also a contrast, because the sheep, as I said, didn't do it because they were seeking some reward or even to avoid punishment. But the goats indicate in a way that had they known that Christ identified with the suffering of others, because he himself suffered, they would have acted differently. But it shows that natural inclination of their hearts was not to love, compassion, mercy, care for the other. The natural inclination of their heart is to avoid punishment, not taking responsibility for their failures. Whereas the sheep did what they were supposed to do without any consideration for it being God, but simply because that's what they do. The challenge we have is most of the time we're more inclined to be like the goats, to not do what we're supposed to do out of the natural inclination of our hearts. We're wounded. We're selfish at times. We don't naturally think of the other. And so this passage right before Lent reminds us of why we're doing what we're doing. Because fasting isn't about what we eat. It's about cultivating a discipline of self-denial to counteract selfishness, so that we will be more inclined out of the natural inclination of our purified heart to offer love, compassion, mercy, and care to those who are in need, to our brothers and sisters whom Christ identifies with, because he suffered as they do. And so this is our call during this period. And we're also called to pray more. We're called to attend services, read the scriptures. All those things are good. But if we do them without the right intention, we will find ourselves like the Pharisee from the parable of the publican and the Pharisee from a couple of weeks ago. Doing everything we're supposed to, checking all the check boxes, meeting all the requirements of the law, at least in letter, but never really experiencing the true spirit of those practices. For when he prayed not to God, but with himself. Because the practices, the prayer, was not out of love for God or neighbor, but just going through the motions, checking all the things off the list. And we can find ourselves doing that on our Lenten journey if we don't orient ourselves towards what's most important: love. We do everything that we do as Orthodox Christians to be better at loving God and loving our neighbor. We deny ourselves through fasting and increased prayer and perhaps less sleep, so that we can be more inclined to deny ourselves in the face and when we are faced with the suffering of others, when we are called to love the person who is in front of us, to love God in the face of our neighbor. So it's not enough to do the practices. That doesn't mean we don't do them, but it means we do them with the right intention. Fast, but fast so that we can love better. Pray more, but pray more so that we are more open to God's love and grace, which permeates our whole being and pours out into a world that is in desperate need of that love. To become vessels of God's love through peeling back, tearing back all of those things that prevent us from living a life in which the natural inclination of our heart is compassion and love. Please, as we consider this scripture passage, as we begin the fasting journey on Monday with our refraining from eating meat, and then the following Monday from the rest of the fast through the Lenten journey into Holy Week, remember why we do what we do. Remember that the practices, all the things that we are prescribed from the church to do, we do them so that we can be love in the midst of the world, so that we can grow and know God better and love our neighbors more authentically. And in that, we will find ourselves in a more authentic expression of our own self, our own identity. And we will see ourselves transformed as members of God, partakers of his divine nature, and beacons of his saving grace, fountains of his saving grace, his love and mercy and compassion in the midst of the world. I pray that you have a beautiful Lenten journey. I hope that it's fruitful, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you at all of the beautiful Lenten services that we will be participating in over the next few months. Thank you kindly. God bless you.